everybody, and welcome back to episode 2 of Faith and Feeling. My name is Denise Towell, and we're back again. Took me a minute to get back into the series. We're gonna go on holiday. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Hope you guys enjoyed your festive season and you were doing a little bit of introspection, doing all the healing, resting that is required for you to do during this festive season. All right, let's get into the episode. So, firstly, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody that gave constructive criticism and gave me proper feedback, and the people that I had discussions with in pertaining to all of this. And, a lot of people were like, no, you're definitely right. This is stuff that needs to be done. Some were like, no, but this is like, mental health and all that stuff is a personal journey. Church doesn't really need to get involved as per se. But if there's an analogy that is used and that is commonly used, is that a church is a hospital. What better place to receive care, healing, and counsel than the house of God itself? Point blank. But anyway, we will get into that some other time. So let's get into it. So having discussions with people, a lot of people were like, you know what, as much as we say that mental health is the cause of the problem, we really need to be able to differentiate between three things. There's a conversation I had with one person. And they were like, there's three things we need to be able to differentiate between: spiritual warfare, emotional exhaustion, and actual clinical mental health problems, illnesses, psychological issues, etc., etc. So I was like, you know what? Let's address some of the misconceptions. Let's talk about some of the stuff, and let's understand what these three things actually are. So I wrote here, I was like, sometimes faith isn't missing. Understanding is what's missing in terms of just how we approach, mental health in the church. A lot of the times we want to use faith as an excuse, as a prerequisite for, but in actual fact, we need to have the facts on the table. We need to have the reports on the table. We need to have everything on the table so that we can be able to help people the way they need to be helped. So, first one is spiritual warfare. Everybody can say that they have experienced a certain level of spiritual warfare. This is internal or external struggles that are often rooted in spiritual opposition. So these can be temptations, doubt, fear, condemnation, or attack on one's faith and identity. So to sum it up, that's what spiritual warfare is. And spiritual warfare usually happens during a time of transition, when you're going through something, when God is about to break through in your life, when you're supposed to let go of something. And that's when people do, they start praying a little bit more, they start doing fasting a little bit more, they seek deliverance, they seek healing, they get into the word so that they can help resolve or help get through spiritual warfare. So I'm going to go through a couple of scriptures here. Not a couple, just one. Ephesians 6:12, it says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." The spiritual warfare is a reality for a lot of us, and it is spiritual in nature, right? And sometimes we tend to confuse each and every one of these three things that we're going to discuss. And that is why spiritual guidance is important. Right? This is why we need to get into our word. This is why we need to pray. This is why we need to be able to discern certain things so that we are not confusing one for the other. And let's get into emotional exhaustion, right? Emotional exhaustion can also be classified as burnout. Usually burnout is after a prolonged period of stress, emotional distress, where you're just tired. I experience burnout every once in a while, a couple of times a year maybe. And it's usually just because I've had prolonged stress. I've had a lot of responsibility to take on. There's a lot of pressure. There's either work, life, personal, whatever. So all of these emotions that I go through during those periods of time, they are not addressed. And if they're not addressed, they lead to exhaustion or burnout. So usually when that happens, you feel numb, you're overwhelmed, you're drained, you don't have motivation, you are irritable, you are frustrated, and you're very withdrawn, right? That's me. I get very withdrawn if I'm burnt out or I'm emotionally exhausted. I don't talk much, I don't say much, and I also get very irritated. Like any tiny little thing can just frustrate me, and I'm just like, I don't need to be here, and I don't need to do this. And a lot of this stuff is linked to over-serving, people pleasing, lack of rest, and lack of self-love and self-care. Usually you give until you can't give anymore, but then you continue to give. Even though you know you're on empty, you continue to give, and that's when that burnout comes. The moment you feel yourself saying, hey, yo, and your body's telling you, we've got nothing left to give, stop, take care of yourself, run it back. Right? So this usually rest, boundaries, support, and lifestyle changes. Burnout is not a sin. It's just your body responding to the circumstances around it or that you're putting it through, right? Even Jesus withdrew to rest. He experienced a form of burnout and he's like, you know what, I need to go into my quiet place. I need to rest and I need to be one with God. And I just need to get back into who I am so I can continue with this good work of the Lord. So we can see this in Mark chapter 6, verse 31. Jesus recognized exhaustion and initiated rest. He's like, nah, not gonna do this. I just need to take a break. And I think this was in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus went into his quiet place and he cried unto the Lord and he's like, hey, yo, listen, I don't want to. But he prayed about it and God helped him through it and he was back into the mission of the day. Right? We also have Elijah in 1 Kings 19, verse 48. Elijah was just like, you know what? Saying kate. I was a fool. And so God is like, hey, relax, chill. You just need to eat, take a nap, and you're going to be all right. And guess what? That's all he needed. That's all he needed. He didn't need some big spiritual intervention. He just needed to eat and sleep. Some of you just need to eat and sleep, okay? And you're going to be fine. And you're going to be fine. And then we look at David. If you read through the Psalms, you'll see that David goes through a lot of like emotional turmoil. One minute he's okay, and the next that he's not. But if you read through the Psalms, you can find a lot of yourself in the Psalms, and you get to understand that what I feel is normal, and it's okay to have highs and lows in life. It's perfectly fine. So let's get into the last bit. Clinical and mental health conditions. Right, these are diagnosable medical and psychological conditions. Depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, the ADHD, autism, all of that stuff. That is stuff that needs a medical practitioner to diagnose. So once that happens, then you can start taking the necessary course of action in order to help manage, to help heal, or to help whatever the case may be, depending on the diagnosis that you've received, right? And usually, if you have a medical condition, there has to be persistent symptoms that you would have noticed. And these symptoms affect your daily life. They're not resolved by prayer alone, may require therapy, medication, or medical intervention, and has biological, psychological, and environmental factors. Seeking professional help is the best thing that you can do for yourself when you realize that I can no longer do this with prayer, I can no longer do this with rest. I actually need to go and see somebody about it. Right? And, we look at Proverbs 11:14. It says, seeking counsel is the best thing that you can do for yourself. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the three things we need to be able to differentiate between when we are dealing with people in the church, especially when it comes to mental health. Let us not go off on a whim and assume that this is a demon or assume that this is a medical condition or just assume that it is rest. We really need to be able to discern and properly understand what it is an individual is going through, and not just an individual, and as yourself, so that you do not make ill-informed decisions about your life, right? So I would have gone on further, but I think I've taken more than enough of your time. We were going to go into why prayer is not enough when it comes to these things, but we'll go into it into the next episode. So hopefully you guys learned a thing or two. I am just here to help. I'm here to do the research and I'm here to help. I'm here to educate. I'm here to make you feel less alone in this. The world is not crowded in this massive, vast land we call planet Earth of emotions, feelings, faith, religion, everything. We're just here to help make sense of everything. I seek guidance where I can, I ask questions where I can, and I think that's why I like to have conversations with people so that I can understand what it is that people are going through. The heart of what I do is in people. It's with the people, right? And I like to mix it up with a lot of things, psychology with, telling them, hey, seek professional help if you must. I'm not a professional. I can help you talk things through. You can just air it out to me and I'll tell you how I feel and what I think is best. So guys, hopefully this helped you. And if you are experiencing, especially when it comes to the medical part of things, if you're experiencing persisting symptoms of something and it's mental or psychological, or even if it's just a health issue, please go and seek help at a general practitioner, therapist, counselor, anyone that is qualified to help you resolve your problem. Do not go to the Mayo Clinic. Do not use the internet. Do not use ChatGPT. Go to a doctor, a qualified doctor, please. Thank you very much. So anyway, guys, this is me. This is the episode. Love, light, and happiness. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.